Hey there writers, and welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Emma and I write romance usually, but I also happen to be a developmental editor. I work freelance doing that, and it's something that gives me an awful lot of pleasure and has also taught me a lot from my own writing over the years. I thought it might be handy if, as a developmental editor, I gave you some kind of tips as to how to get the absolute most out of using an editor. Having an editor, either a developmental editor or a line editor or a copy editor, can work out to be one of the most expensive things that you spend money on when it comes to publishing your book. I have had editors work on my books before, but although I have self-published some books, I'm mainly traditionally published, and so I've never actually paid an editor to work on my books for me. I've always had it through my publishing house. So I can see it from kind of both sides as an editor, as an author, although to be honest, I have never, as I say, actually employed an editor myself. So the first thing that I would say is really, really important when you are looking for an editor is to make sure that you get the right editor for you. And I think that the best way to do this is to get a recommendation. I know a lot of people will just go to Fiverr, which I happen to be on, or any of the other sites where you can hire freelancers, and people might have really, really good ratings and reviews on there, and that's great, but they might not be perfect for your genre or just for the way that you like to work. So what I would suggest instead is that you go for a recommendation from other writer friends who have used editors before and who write in your genre. I just think it's a much safer way to make sure that you get someone who's going to be a good fit for you. The other thing that you can do to ensure that you enjoy working together and that it's going to be a good relationship is to ask for a little sample, an editing sample. So just kind of like a chapter or a couple of thousand words that the editor does so that they can show you exactly how they work, because editors work in different ways. So the way that I like to work when I'm doing a developmental edit is that I put most of the edits, everything that I can, actually in the manuscript itself. And that's because as an author, that's how I like to get my edits and how I find them to be just most useful to me. I know other editors work where they produce a much longer report going over everything in the manuscript, but then you have to find what they're referring to in the manuscript. So I just think that it makes more sense to me anyway to actually put the points where it happens to take place in the manuscript. But I then also do provide a little report with kind of the big overarching things if there's stuff that I think needs dealing with. But if somebody says to me that they would rather that there were less comments and more in way of a report, then I'm happy to work that way as well. But if you get someone to do a little bit of a sample, you can see how they work and just see if you kind of agree with the points that they're making and that they seem to really understand your genre and your story as you'd want them to. One thing that I would say not to do is to get a whole bunch of editors and ask them all for a sample. So one or two, fine, but if you're going for kind of 5 or 6, honestly, I think at that point you are wasting people's time. These people are self-employed, you know, it's taking their time to work through these edits. Maybe ask them a few more questions before you get started so that you have a better idea and you're not needing to ask quite so many people to do a sample edit for you. Anyway, that was a very long first point, wasn't it? But moving on to the second point is to give your editor as much information as possible about you, your writing, and your book. So, as an editor, what I find really great is when I have a little bit of background about the writer, when I know what they're hoping to do with the book, and a synopsis is also really, really helpful, as well as like just knowing what genre they're writing. I appreciate that they're definitely going to tell you that, but if there are any subgenres, any tropes that they're hoping to hit, particularly if they are wanting to go along the trad publishing route. I know an awful lot about writing romance because that's what I've done for a very long time. I know about the industry, and I know how certain tropes work and what publishers and agents are going to be after. So it just really helps if I know what you are actually hoping to do with this manuscript. Tip number 3 is to have your manuscript in the best condition possible to send to your editor. So sometimes I have writers who come to me and they say, hi, I'm in a little bit of a muddle with my manuscript. It's kind of complete, but it's not really working, and by no means do I expect the manuscript to be perfect at all. And in that case, there's more sort of puzzling out what exactly isn't working with the manuscript. But often, by the time a developmental editor, and especially a line editor, comes along, the manuscript will be in a complete form. It's gone through many, many drafts. And if you don't take the time to go through, to put proper paragraphs in, to put, I appreciate this sounds silly, but sometimes people don't, to put speech marks, to put full stops and things like that in, it makes it much, much harder for the editor to work on that manuscript. Most editors, I think, are very fastidious when it comes to spelling and to grammar, and we can't let it go. We can't let it go. So you end up, or if you're me anyway, you end up kind of fiddling around, putting in speech marks and things because you want to do the best job possible for the author. Of course you do. But it does mean that it's then quite hard to actually get into the flow of the story itself because you just have to keep stopping to make these little changes. So yeah, just try to make sure that anything like that you've dealt with yourself. Of course, I'm not saying that the grammar has to be absolutely perfect. That's not the case at all. But it does make it a lot easier to work on a manuscript that's kind of in good shape. It's really, really helpful. Tip number 4 is to communicate with your editor. So I always say to my clients, please, if you've got any questions about anything that I've suggested, come back to me. I'm more than happy to explain further. We can chat it through. If you're not sure about something that I haven't even pointed out and you were wondering if it could possibly be a problem, come to me. Basically, I want to be able to have a conversation with you about your work. I want to form a relationship with you, to understand you and your writing. And I will, while I'm editing, I might even send some messages during the process, not waiting until the end, asking certain things just so that it will make it clearer. And it's so sad when you don't get that kind of back and forth with a writer. I understand that people are busy and maybe that's not what they want, but I just feel that you get so much more out of an editor if you do have that communication and that back and forth between you, so that you're getting a relationship, you're properly working together on the manuscript, and it's not just me taking it and then giving it back with some suggestions. And sometimes it might be that I suggest something and I get the author saying, oh no, because And then I'll come back with, oh, right, okay, so how about we try this? So again, you're just getting so much more out of your editor because you are getting more suggestions based on what you are coming back with on their comments. So just, yeah, just make sure that you get that communication going. And my final tip, and this is a really, really important one, is that you should never feel that you have to accept every single suggestion that your editor makes. It is your manuscript, it's your baby that you have worked so hard on. And while hopefully you have a fantastic editor who knows the industry really well, who knows your genre fantastically, you really, really gel, there's plenty of back and forth, they understand your vision, there are still going to be times when you might go, oh, do you know what, no, I'm not happy with that. Ideally these would only be like small things that that you're not changing, because if there is something big about your manuscript that your editor is saying that there could be a problem with, then obviously you do really, really need to think about that, and whether you should change it if you do trust what your editor is saying and that they know the market, etc., etc., etc. But yeah, if it's important to you, it is your manuscript, you stick to your guns and do not feel that you have to accept absolutely everything that your editor suggests. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope that it was helpful. Stick around, watch a few more if you like, give some thumbs ups, even subscribe, because we do have a lot of fun on this channel, and I will be back in the next one.